Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Quality QuaranTIME. My name is Alex Vander Johnson. Today, my guest is Morgan Clark-Youngblood. You might recognize that last name because I actually interviewed her brother Alex Clark-Youngblood as one of the first episodes of this series. In that episode, we talk about his podcast where he interviews different people of his family, and Morgan was one of those people. Morgan is one of my very best friends in the entire world. She's gone on to do some amazing things. She's helped out with the Syrian refugees over in Greece, helping mothers and their newborns and their children. Helping moms in general is a sort of a theme of the nonprofit work that she has started to zero in on and focus on. But she's previously worked in health and education in Honduras and Ecuador. She's seen some truly dangerous and traumatic situations, dead bodies in towns where there's gangs who sort of run certain cities and whatnot. So I've always been sort of blown away by what drives a person to seek out these experiences and want to go to the most dangerous parts of the world in order to help out. I just think she's got one of the biggest hearts of people that I know, but she's not she's also so tough. She's super tough and empathetic. So I wanted to learn more about her decision-making process and why she has followed the life course that she has. So here we go. Hello. Oh.
Hello.
Hello. You dressed up, and now here you told me to wear something low cut, so I did.
I wore something low cut.
I know, but yours is
I just had meetings today, so I had to. My pants are not dressed up.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I can't believe how much like your mom you're looking like. Where are you right now?
At my mom's house.
You are?
Yeah.
Can you show me around? Oh, now I see. Now I recognize it.
Yeah. You want me to still show you around?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I'm a creep. I want everyone to see. So you're in Georgia right now?
Yes, because my mom had to have surgery, so
How is your mom doing? She had to have surgery in the midst of this. Open heart surgery.
Yeah, so a fun kink to everything. A nice quarantine treat, I guess.
Yeah.
But she's doing much better, so it was a real treat, and it kind of puts things in perspective, I guess.
Well, it kept getting postponed and postponed and postponed.
Exactly, yeah. Postponed until we were in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah.
She likes that attention, Robin. Just trying to do everything bigger. So she was the first non-elective patient at Emory Healthcare get surgery. So, first non-emergency surgery, I guess. So.
Wow. And I also mentioned Alex's podcast that he did with you. Did you ever end up listening to it?
I've never listened to it because it was recorded 3 years ago, and it's kind of hard at this age to listen to yourself younger. At least I find that way.
Right.
I guess I don't have any need to listen to myself.
Right.
Or see myself.
You're not a narcissist like me.
That's probably a good skill to learn. Both people are needed in the world.
Right.
You couldn't highlight issues that I worked on and stuff without those people. So,
I know you didn't listen to the episode, but what do you think that because in the episode you're talking about going to Greece to help out with Syrian refugees. What do you think is the biggest misconception that you had at the time?
Whoa, dang, I wish I had listened now.
I know, that's why I was
I'm sure a lot of things. I know, I'm not sure I said in the podcast, but I know some of my biggest misconceptions or things I was most surprised about going there, because previously I had worked in Latin America, in the U.S., and as well as in East and West Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my biggest surprises was that I was going to the EU, I was going to Greece, and I thought things would be more organized. And especially because we were in the EU, it's a crisis overseen by the European Union. I thought maybe human rights would be more at the forefront. There's also billions upon billions of dollars going into this crisis. I thought we would see more return for investment, I guess. But I really arrived to a place that was poorly organized, was not fairly run many times, and things have not really progressed greatly. And then also when I arrived, most international actors were being pulled out. That was the agreement with the EU. Not to get too technical, but so it was run by people who really had very little experience as well. And I had worked with refugees in the past, but with the UN and other huge international organizations, and things were definitely more organized.
Right.
So it was really interesting being in the middle of Europe, and like I lived right on the beach. I was really close to
you kept mentioning that you were going to a beach town. Alex seemed to be giving you some shit that you were going to a beach town and that things were going to be.
So it wasn't an international tourism destination, but it was like 30 minutes from Athens. So it was definitely like an Athens beach town, because Athens isn't on the beach. So
right. Yeah. Well, it's a crisis that certainly gained international attention, but not everything that you've worked on has made it to that scale, but is almost just as dire or just as serious. Well, I mean, I guess with pain, it's sort of hard to measure like how one situation is maybe more painful. Right. I mean, is it sort of, it's got to be weird to even think about the marketing of certain tragedies and like, because there's so many things, there's so many injustices of the world that don't receive the publicity that they when you're there and you're in it, you're like, how do people not know about this?
And especially because I don't like talking about my experiences, I guess, publicly too much. I mean, a friend on friend, of course, but publicly too much, because one, it does border kind of selling a line or selling an image, I guess. Yeah. And then two, it's hard because the US has so many issues too, and I think it's important to highlight, like, I was interested in global health because I also like to travel. I was also interested in getting outside of the country. So, I mean, it's a bit more challenging as well. So I like that, but I think, as you mentioned, this week and this pandemic has really even further highlighted, or this presidency further highlighted, injustices. But it's really hard when one gets more attention than the other, because also the term migrants, refugees, asylum seekers have different definitions, but they also get different international protection. So my first jobs were in Honduras in violence prevention programs, but internationally, the global law don't really recognize, except for certain groups of Hondurans, as having any international protection or rights to immigration, as we've seen in the immigration crisis through Mexico and in our own country. And so it's interesting to go from that, where you see incredible levels of violence and situations, to working with Colombian refugees who have had international protection, as it should be, for 30 years, but similar stories. And then to Syria, which, I mean, is a total different level of violence, and all groups face incredible injustice and inequities. So I don't want to say like, oh, they had it really nice. Right. But it's just crazy that how do you quantify that violence or that experience or that level of suffering? Right. And I think it's important to highlight too, no one wants to leave their country. I think that's a big misconception. And even Syrians I worked with from Damascus and stuff, like whose homes had been destroyed, would tell me, after being in a refugee camp for 2 years, they would say, if I could, I would return to Syria right now. And they're in the middle of Greece. Wow. And all they wanted to do is go home. So I think that's also a big misconception in the U.S. that everyone, if they could, would run over here. Right. We really love ourselves, but
is it hard talking to Americans about like what you do, simply because there are so many misconceptions?
Yeah, I find so it's hard because I think people's immediate reaction is like, framing me as a martyr, and I've gotten paid for all of these jobs. So it's a job and profession for me. I like my job a lot. I feel so fortunate, and I think I talked to this on Alex's podcast. Is that I was reflecting the other day, and you and Julianne, I'm incredibly proud of, because I think you guys also have done work like this. That I love what I do, and I've always loved what I do. So it's kind of weird to talk about it, because then people frame you as like, wow, you're so selfless. And I think a lot of my work is grounded and is thoughtful in values and what I think is right. But I also like doing it. And then two, Americans, compared to many other countries I've lived in, don't have the best understanding of the world and current affairs. That's not all Americans, of course, but I think overall there's a limited understanding.
Why do you think that is? Education or?
Yeah, I don't know. And
do you think it's just part of the, because like, I mean, in Europe, it's part of the culture that you travel to, like, it's like, you like going to Florida for them is like going to Italy, and you like go and you experience people who speak a totally different language. They view the world a totally different way. I mean, I guess you could say that the same with Florida.
Florida versus Vermont.
Yeah.
Florida's a lovely place.
Yes. Oh, I know. Yeah.
But yeah, I think one is that you have a much easier access to culture, and that's something. Of course, sometimes when I lived in Northern Europe, I got equally annoyed with people shitting on Americans, because I think there's some really amazing things about Americans too. But I think it's access to culture. I think that and I think you're really acutely seeing this during quarantine, not much. We haven't had to sacrifice much in many years. I've seen Americans as a whole. Of course, there's groups of Americans that have had a much different reality, a much more difficult reality.
Right, like Katrina and like...
Yeah. But I think also we're just not we're pretty isolated over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like even quarantine, I was listening to an Irish comedian talk about it, and he's like, for the past, since World War II, everything in our country, or even before that, has been difficult. So having to self-isolate isn't a big ask, whereas Americans see it as this big injustice, and I think a lack of perspective sometimes. Well, and I think we're isolated too. But.
Yeah, and what do you say to, because there is there is an ideology in America of like, even with the work that you do, somebody might say, well, why are you going, to Greece or Honduras to fix a problem when we've got plenty of issues here?
Right, yeah.
Like, what do you say to something like that? Huh?
I see that a lot. I try to be, and I think you saw this in my brother's interview. I think we were raised to be very honest and sincere people, because I liked it. I found it more interesting. I also, some part of it was practical. It's really difficult to get hired in public health and in global health. So if I did more difficult things in the beginning and worked on more difficult projects, it's easier to later get hired in the U.S. So that's why I try not to. I mean, it's a profession as well, so you have to be honest and frame those things.
Yeah.
I think I have personally tried to to work on issues that I think need support and international support.
Right.
But of course, there's like any job, there's I'm going to weigh jobs based on benefits and where they are, those kind of things. They're not purely selfish or selfless, I should say.
Yeah. But then you're like, oh, Honduras, there's like the highest murder rate in the world. But you're like, but the job benefits, you should see them.
None of those things were true.
Right.
But it was challenging and very interesting. Like, I don't know what's wrong with my mind, but violence prevention and particularly gang violence, which again, I could have worked in Chicago or even parts of Atlanta, were very difficult. And then I'm currently in school in Atlanta and doing clinical rotations here, and work a lot of times with low income populations. And I work with women and in sexual and reproductive health. And some of the stories, especially of young adolescents, I really love working with teenagers. is some of the worst I've ever heard because of the
Mm,
inequities are so ginormous between populations.
right.
And there's inequities in every country, but it's just that our government does have so much money,
Mm,
and we do have infrastructure, kind of, but like these things shouldn't be in existence in our country, and also that we don't really know about it. Like, I mean, I'm not sure I knew that much about it, maybe more than the average person, but
knew much about what?
just like I'm thinking in Atlanta, a lot of the
Oh.
teenagers I've worked with are unable to finish high school because of violence or having to work for their family, support their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, a lot of the teenagers I see, all of them, and I'm talking about starting at age 13, all have an sexually transmitted disease.
Oh,
All
wow.
are very high rates of teen pregnancy. I mean, those are get access to education, basic education. We're not even talking about university, and be able to prevent teen pregnancy are pretty basic outcomes. And we have a high maternal mortality rate in Georgia
Yeah.
too. So those are things you judge a developing country's wellness on, and
Yeah.
we're not achieving them in Georgia. So
Ooh. Well,
California's doing well.
yeah, that's why I'm here.
In some parts.
Well, and that's the thing is like sometimes I feel like, in terms of being an advocate,
Mhm.
I feel like even with Georgia, I'm like I've done my time in the
Right.
South. I'm ready
Right.
to live like a good life. And
Right.
part of me almost feels like selfish in living in California because it's like
Mhm.
I'm not really here changing anybody's minds about anything as like an
Mhm.
advocate.
Right.
Whereas I
Yeah.
could be doing more in Georgia, but I personally want to be happy.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I feel this. I'm getting my clinical training here, but it's because it was a top 3 program. It's not because I love Georgia and I'm worried about. I mean, while I'm here, I've been able to get involved, but it's not because I'm worried about Georgia's people. Even
Well,
though I'm.
but it's right. But I'm sure
Yeah.
that your family being there and those things, as you were
Yeah.
saying, there's lots of factors that go into like why
Yeah.
we make a
Yeah.
decision. Now,
Yeah.
one of the things that you said in Alex's interview, which I know you didn't listen to, but you are talking about the Colombian conflict and
Oh
how
yes.
people fled from Colombia in order to go to Quito, Ecuador, and
Yeah.
how these people live in absolute terror because
Mhm.
from Colombia, basically people are terrorized in order to and pressured to leave their homes and get out because of
Mhm.
the FARC.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they would even send people from the FARC
Mhm.
into Ecuador,
Mhm.
just to like spy on them at like a grocery store or like a train
Yeah.
station or like whatever, just to make them paranoid and like live in
Yeah,
total
I guess it
fear.
is terrorism. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
And you sort of broke down. You broke down crying,
Mhm. Mhm.
as you always do. No, no, but
We're
you
trying not to this time.
you broke down crying, and what was really apparent to me was that you have truly witnessed the terror that these people have experienced.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
something you said is, I'm not sure how much I've actually helped, but I feel
Mhm.
fortunate to have witnessed some things and heard the stories of these people. What do you
Mhm. Yeah.
think? What do you think is like? To use the word fortunate to have witnessed this, like what do you
Mhm.
think it is? What do you think the value is in you seeing this pain and this fear that people have gone through?
Yeah. Um, that's a really good question. Um, I think for myself, selfishly, it really frames issues I go through on a daily basis. So I'm talking about from a totally personal side. It really frames the struggles that I deal with on a daily basis. It also makes me a bit more introspective and
Meaning, not to interrupt you, but meaning that, things that you're upset about, and you've had plenty of struggles as well. But like
yeah.
growing up with a single mom or having
Uh-huh.
diabetes,
Mhm.
those issues seem minuscule compared to what you've seen.
Yeah, and I don't like. um, in my clinical work, I really like to focus on mental health. And so I don't think it's effective or beneficial to compare or rank trauma. But
right.
for me, at least, getting over anxiety or stress or anything, it really helps because I think you can find, if you, especially with uh, the Colombian stories, the Syrian stories I've heard, and being able to see that people are still positive on the other side. I think, I don't know if
Wow.
I said this in Alex's interview, I think through my work, I've seen the worst things people can do, the worst possible side of us, and there's terrible, terrible things that we can do to each other. But I've also been able and fortunate to see the good and the strength in people. And so a lot of times when I feel like, fuck, I can't make it, and I've gone through those recently with my mom's current health issues or maybe health issues I have, that I know I'm like, okay, Morgan, you can do this. And also hearing those people's stories, and there's always positivity in the stories they tell me, I think it helps me identify bright spots. So there's one way to cope with trauma and stress, and especially if I'm in a job that's continuously traumatic and continuously stressful, is that it's important to look for those bright spots. I mean, that's the only way to make things better and to continue going.
Right.
I also think there's usually a way out, but I also think it helps me be aware, and hopefully people I work with in the future or friends or people in my personal life, is that it helps me be a bit more introspective or slow down and listen and think, we're missing a lot of stuff. Like, I guess now I'm an expert in Latin America and have a lot of experience in Latin America. I know a lot about refugee health. So those are two things I'm an expert in, but those are only two things out of an insane amount of problems. Or like, recently, and as they should, there's more and more focus on the killing of young Black people, to stop and think of things that are happening in communities right next to us, and to think about those families and in actions or bias we might carry ourselves and how that affects the people around us. Really, I think it has allowed me to stop and think how each of my actions could affect the people who surround me, and also how my actions can hopefully help build a community and build my community too. And as you said, I don't think it has to be a huge global issue. Like it could be in your apartment complex, it could be in the gay community in LA. I just think if we're all a bit more thoughtful, have a little less fear towards one another too, that we can do a lot of great things. Or at least it sounds so cheesy, but make the world a little bit better place. But just think about it. If we all are a little bit more understanding, then I think we'll pass policies that are better, or do more effective actions in our community.
Right. Well, when you're talking to somebody like me, who has like moved to LA, has went into like storytelling and film and acting and writing and like all those sorts of things, sometimes those things can, at least on some level, and on some level they are very self-involved, right? It's like, I'm telling my story, I'm telling my perspective. Do you ever have any frustrations in talking to me or anyone else that like maybe hasn't followed the same path that you have in wanting to like help the world? I mean, I do want to help the world. I mean, that sounds bad because I do want to help the world, but
I think like you can each, like, there's value to my brother and I always crack up because we were kind of raised that like business is bad, but I don't think, I mean, I have a lot of friends that work in business. I think each of us is necessary, and we couldn't all work in nonprofits or in healthcare or in art, but each thing is necessary. And for example, I've seen a lot of healing, and I've seen artists do a lot of incredible things, especially in refugee camps or in areas where people have experienced a lot of stress. So, and it lets people like me or people who've experienced traumatic things disconnect from their reality too. So I think it's important to recognize the value in everyone, and I think perhaps also that's hearing other people's stories have really helped me recognize everyone's value.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the one thing that people should work on is trying to stay informed. And it's hard because I also know that I'm highly educated, and we've been all lucky to have really great education. But to the best of our ability, stay informed, but also to be understanding. And again, I think fear perpetrates a lot of issues. Like, I have never wanted to marry a woman, but why does same-sex marriage need to be illegal? Why, I've never sought an abortion, but why are we afraid of women getting an abortion?
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of things. So I think, like, I'm not religious in any way, and I do fear really religious people, but I think sometimes, but I think we need to be more understanding and also take the time to listen to others. And I think as long as you do that and go into things, and I don't always do this, with an open mind. You did a YouTube video, right, with a Trump supporter, where you compare the...
Yes, where they did like a conservative and a liberal next to each other. Yeah.
To be honest, I'm surrounded by very ethnically diverse people and people from all different countries in my friend group, but they are all pretty highly educated, have good jobs, and vote the same. So I should try to push, and all aren't very religious, so I should try to push myself to understand other perspectives as well. It's difficult, but I really try to approach people with less fear, and I think my work has been able to let me slow down a bit and identify the connections we each carry with each other.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, and it's funny that you bring up that video, because in that video, the comments are all about how terrible I am. Like all the comments are from, a lot of the comments, I'd say the majority of the comments are about how I'm lazy and how I don't work, and of course it's the conservative that's like hard at work. And the reason is, like, my jobs just wouldn't let me film at the work. So, like, the perception was that I'm just, like, on my computer all day. I don't know. And that's a whole...
That highlights a lack of critical thinking, which I think, again, we're lucky. I'm lucky that I have really good education, and I'm not saying that in a boastful way, but it's allowed me to build critical thinking skills and a job that has increased my critical thinking. But I think there is a need to slow down and try to examine the other side. Like, I try to do that with our current administration, but it's super difficult. I'm not saying that I always do it,
no,
but I do
it's
try
hard
to slow down and understand, like, what? How are you voting, or how are you like agreeing with anything this man says? You know, like, because to me it makes absolutely no sense.
Right. Well, and that's something that it makes me very afraid. I mean, talk about, like, first of all, most people hate confrontation.
Yeah.
Like, if there's like a if there's an issue with a neighbor, people have a hard time, like, telling them, hey, keep the noise down or whatever.
Right.
To go and say, like, hey, you should believe gay people have rights, or hey, like, stop, police should stop killing black people. It's like, it then triggers all these, like, narratives of past, like, then it reminds me of, like, you know, when, like, something like Romeo and Juliet, where there's two sides, and there's this long history of just, like, hating each other, and then, like, there's certain actions that align with those, you know, past actions.
And I think it's also difficult, especially Americans, like, a lot of this corona pushback, I really don't understand. And I've talked with a lot of people, like, why is this, like, my right to do whatever I want, a acutely American concept, but also, and of course I'm speaking in generalizations, I know this isn't all Americans, but also, why are we so, like, I feel like our world and what we care about is so small, like, and insular, like, just our direct family. And it's like, it is more difficult to take on more global issues because the world, it seems like an overwhelming place, but I just don't I don't know, it just seems like a lot of
Well, it's certainly, I mean, that it's not in your nature particularly. I mean, the second that you could, you got out, right? Like, I mean, our senior year, you were taking half of your classes at a college because you were like done with high school. I love how like both my best friends, like one's in Germany and, you know, the other
yeah.
one is like taking classes. What is it that you don't like or didn't like about our high school or and maybe it's not even about that. Maybe it's just like, maybe it's not about not liking something. Maybe it's that you saw that the world was so much bigger and you wanted to get out of it. I don't know. What's your comment to that?
I think I'm a deeply curious person. So like, my mom was always asking me when I meet people or talk to people, she's like, how did you think of that question? Like, I could, like, one thing I do research. I'm a researcher too. And that's like, whoa, the biggest gift to me when I can sit down and ask people like a lot of questions. I guess kind of like a voyeur, like being able to see into someone's life. So I knew I wanted to explore more and get out more. I guess I felt a bit boxed in, and I'm fortunate that my family never boxed me in really. I felt a bit boxed in based on like what our area of Atlanta was producing, what it focused on. I felt like it was pretty focused on material things, and a lot of people doing jobs I wasn't interested in too. And then also in high school I was diagnosed, or right before, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and I struggled with a lot of health issues, and then my mom was really sick and I had to take care of her during high school. And so unfortunately or fortunately, I had to grow up really quickly. Now as an adult, I look back and was like, dang, I wish I had partied more, or experimented in drugs a bit more. but I mean, like, I think I'll tell my kid, like, go, like, be wild, like, as long as they have a good relationship, you know?
Right.
But for me, I just felt like I felt like I was 25, but having to be friends with 15-year-olds. So it's nothing like wrong with any individual person. Like, there's some great, amazing people that were from our high school. It was just that it was like, what's that movie where the adult wakes up in a child's body, or the child
13 going on 30?
Yeah, I was the opposite of me.
Oh my god.
Now looking back, I wish I could have been younger. It's unfortunate that kids have to grow up at a younger age, but it's what was asked of me, and I learned a lot of skills from it. So it was really hard for me then to fit back into the high school. And then also,
which, by the way, hi to all of our high school friends.
I love to connect with people now. It's nothing to do with anyone as an individual. It's just my life circumstance.
Right. It wasn't a personality, as you're saying. It wasn't a personality thing. It was just like a... No. Well, and you know that, like, I very much, like, followed you around. You were one of the people that I just, like...
I feel like I learned so much from you, though.
Well, maybe that's the beauty of our friendship, but you created this, you created this and convinced me to join in on this independent study where we basically had a free period every day to apply to colleges.
That was genius. I was just thinking of that on a run, maybe Sunday, maybe once you contacted me for the interview, and I was thinking, what a fun time. We just hung out with those librarians.
Yes. Like, we had a free period every day honestly though, this is it's an amazing idea that I don't understand why it isn't part of the curriculum. It should be part of the curriculum, like, to have a free period in the day of figuring out what your next steps are post-graduation. Why is that not actually a class?
Well, a terrible education. I mean, we had amazing teachers, so thank you, all those teachers.
Yeah.
You guys set me up. But a terrible system, because and also I think something, and I think you and Julianne are both like this too. Something I know is still a strength of mine is that if something doesn't seem effective or worth my time, and maybe this is a fault to sometimes, I'm not going to do it. Like, I think I'm very good at weeding out what is necessary. And same with like rules. Like I'm happy to follow rules I think are necessary, but I definitely won't follow still to this day rules that aren't. But yeah, I remember I think I thought like why if I think we needed credits to graduate, but we didn't need to learn any of the courses they were offering us. It wasn't good stuff. I think it had to be like another art or PE, you know?
Oh, yeah,
It wasn't something that was worth our time.
Right. Well, I mean, and I'll say like my parents had no idea what they were doing when it came to college, and I don't know if I would have applied to as many. I would actually, I can say with complete certainty, I wouldn't have applied to as many colleges as I did.
You applied to a lot. You applied to more than I did. But I was thinking so fondly, like how fun was that? Because I remember from the library we got that book that like described the different colleges and like if you're this, you should go here.
Yes.
Which again, this is all such a like we are so fortunate. I shouldn't criticize the system too much because we're so fortunate that we have the time to do that and have access to those things and to that support because that's when a lot of people can't access college because of that. But
well, unlike you, I'm very grateful for the education that I got.
I am too, especially compared to others in the area.
Yeah.
But I think everyone should have access to that.
Yes.
But
yes, me too.
I remember being so excited, like it was like the world is ours to think through all of these things. And
totally.
I guess also because maybe we didn't connect so much to the place we were currently at. Like I had no desire. Like all I wanted to do was see more.
Right.
Which is still like I think traveling, exploring is my favorite thing. So
yeah. Well, I think that's clearly part of what connects me to you and your curiosity and your love for other people and your desire to step into other people's shoes. I think is, I mean, you take it to the next level, and I'm just like, I'm always constantly in awe of you.
I am as well, and we're so fortunate to have friendships as we do. But.
Yeah. Well, what is something that has brought you pure joy this week? What is something that you're currently obsessed with?
Joy.
Yeah.
Oh, good. This is good. So I finally slowed down. So before I had a really hard time staying in the house. So I feel like I'm going a bit stir crazy now, but quarantine has helped me slow down and see how much fun you can have at home.
Yeah.
But so I've become obsessed with 1,000-piece puzzles.
1,000 piece?
1,000. If anyone has bigger in the Atlanta area,
my
way.
How many have you finished?
My mind never stops, so it really slows down my mind. But so how long did it take me to finish?
No, how many puzzles have you finished?
3 or 4, I think. Not so many, so don't be too impressed.
Are you kidding me? 3 or 4 1,000-piece puzzles? We completed one like a 500-piece puzzle, and then I started on a second one, and I was like, I can't do this.
Well, so that's how I was at first, but if I do it alone, I enjoy it a lot more. And then, but don't get ones that are all one color. A lot of one color, it makes it difficult.
So you're the total opposite of me because I hate doing it alone, and I want there to be like lots of animals and lots of different things to make it easier.
Well, no, that does make it easier. If you have just like an ocean, it doesn't make it easier.
Oh, you're saying you don't like the one color ones.
No, that's terrible. That's like torture.
Yeah. Well, Morgan, thank you so much for spending this quality quarantine with me.
It's so fun to see everyone you're talking to, too.
Yeah, I hope we catch up again soon.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Quality QuaranTIME. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. See you next time.